Does it ask you on your end for consent?
It did not, which is funny that it
Oh,
mentioned consent to you, but then it was like,
I think I
no,
just called it consent, but it's really just approval. Like it's like this is gonna happen, but it doesn't ask you for consent. That's interesting.
no, it did not. It asked for no consent whatsoever. It was just like, you're going to do it. All right, let me see. All right, there we go. It's easier for me. All right. Hi.
What up?
Are we recording? Are we
We're
being
recording, but
professional
I can
now?
edit it. But we can. Yes, I mean, but you should
I
be
want to make your edit
anti-professional.
easy.
Yeah, you should be anti-professional. You know what I mean?
All right. I was about to be like, oh, all right. Now I can relax. Now you start recording.
Yeah, get into the drama. Also, the exciting things. Get into all of it.
All the things. I know it's so crazy. Well, I was just telling, as I was explaining the artwork behind me to you, I actually bought it when I was renting this office in 2020. In July of 2020, I'd been in my home for almost 4 months at that point in our bedroom with a deadbolt, because at that point we had like a 1.5-year-old and Ella was 5. I forget how old Ella was when pandemic happened. And so that July, I moved into an office and I bought the rich lady painting behind me because I was going to open my business. Like I got my first LLC and I was going to start a book coaching company. And you were like client number 2.
Wow. We need to emphasize that a rich lady painting is a painting you get to anticipate for when you are rich, like
Yeah.
manifestation painting.
It was well, it was expensive too for somebody
Manifestation purchase.
for somebody who had barely opened the doors on a business and was still working a full-time job. It was definitely like, I'm going to buy this painting that only rich ladies can afford, because one day it won't feel like such a stretch. One day it'll feel like a thing I can do with greater ease and not like a special. But I used to always, when I lived in New York, and we would like go into like Agatha and Valentina, like those fancy, like Dean and DeLuca, those little fancy shops. And my mom would buy fresh squeezed orange juice from those places. And I would always call it rich people's orange juice because it was like pulpy.
I went to a new bagel place in Silver Lake, Los Angeles, California, and they tried to sell me. I mean, you're already charging me obscene prices. First of all, the bagels are trash. I'm not going to name the place because I'm not trying to put a business under. Yeah. Get your money. But out here with that Tropicana in a bottle, like you couldn't even squeeze an orange for this factory setup you have. So I have thoughts about orange juice.
Yeah, it's hard to find a fresh squeezed orange juice.
Because I think orange juice in a bagel is like, next level.
How it works.
Combo. Next level.
How it works.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a place over on 2nd Avenue in New York that is like my favorite orange juice in a bagel spot that I never get to go to anymore. My mom used to live at 75th and 2nd, and it was like, maybe upper 60s and 2nd Avenue, and it was just like the bomb bagel spot. But
all right, I'm going to put you onto the best orange juice in America.
Yeah, let's hear it.
It's a place called La Careta on Bird Road in Miami.
Yeah.
La Careta has the best orange juice in America.
All right.
In America.
There. I'm going.
You will be like, this is insane. This is gold. This is actual citrus gold.
Yeah. We went to get Cubanos from where you sent us to in Miami. If you remember that.
Maria's Laundromat?
Yes. That's where we went. Yeah.
Maria's
Laundromat. It was awesome.
Yeah,
we had a really good time there too. It was fun. My husband talks to everybody, so we were like friends with the whole restaurant by the time we were done.
That place is tight.
Yeah.
Tell me about Rise and books and literature.
Yeah. So so that's the crazy part. I opened this little office with this fancy lady painting, and you were literally like client number 1 or 2. I mean, you were like there in July. I remember that first phone call with you sitting in that office. And like us agreeing to work together. And here we are like almost 5 years later. And we're still here, which is like absolutely insane.
Like we're still alive?
Yes.
That part? You mean?
That part. We're still, at the time of recording, we were both still alive. So anything can change. And last night.
Please don't make this my last. Not that I don't want to have a last conversation with you. That I don't want to die and have my
No, we were
last
watching The Pit
Substack be.
last night. Have you seen The Pit? The new
I've
like
heard about it.
VR?
Everyone loves it, but I
Everyone
haven't
loves
seen it.
it because it's good. It's
Yeah.
actually really, I'm not even into procedurals, and it's good, but it also does have that like that constant reminder of like how fragile we are and like how this can just go away at like any second, like one of my best friends is actually an ER doctor. And like, I always wonder, like, how do you sit with that mortality, like every single day as part of your job, and like literally watch people die in front of you on a regular basis. Like, but,
What did he say?
hmm?
What did he say? The ER doctor.
Oh, I've had many discussions with her. She says you desensitize. That's how you do it.
Nice.
She says that, yeah. Yeah, that's how you do it. You
Cool.
actually stop getting.
I was ready for like a real spiritual.
No, you have to
You
disassociate.
disassociate. Understood.
Yeah.
Okay.
Although last night on The Pit, there's a scene where like a young man dies, like early 20s, and his parents are there, and the mother starts crying, and everybody, and they showed what is true in the ER, and she says it's true. She's like, people die all day long, and you just get used to it because that's part of the job. And she's like, but the only thing that breaks them, and especially her, is when the mothers come in, and when a mother starts wailing. Like no one can deny, like I'm getting goosebumps at even like the thought of it, because that sound is so visceral that like that's actually like they could just be a corpse on the table, but when a mother starts wailing, like they're not just a corpse on a table anymore.
Wow.
And so she says that's the point where like she can really keep up the boundaries emotionally, but when that happens, she always has to step outside. So, but yeah, but it's
wow.
It's watching The Pit. We watched that scene last night, and it was cool because they showed that when the mother started wailing, they showed like other people in the hospital, like women, like literally like they look like moles underground, and they all just like pop their heads up, like I know that sound, and years ago when I had the day job, before I was book coaching and ghostwriting books at night, but I actually worked in the foster care system in LA. And I worked at the Children's Courthouse in Los Angeles over in Monterey Park, which is a terrible place to work, although you are situated in the best food in LA County, Monterey Park. So it's like every day for lunch, like I live now in Ohio, it's just the worst. I'm like, oh my God, I was so spoiled for 6 years in Monterey Park, just eating the best food every day. And so but it was the same thing in that building. Like you had to disassociate from what happened every day in that building. But then every once in a while you'd hear a mother screaming because she lost custody, and no one could, we would all break, like the whole building would break. And so it's just, there's something really primal in that experience. So, but yeah, I was watching that last night. I was like, fuck man, like we're fragile, like we're fragile beings, but and I guess that's why we tell stories, because we're fragile beings and our words are actually less fragile than we are. And so
not
yeah,
lead into your work and your workshops and the company, but if anyone's actually thinking about wanting to do something, they should probably do it.
They should.
Because you might not.
You might be in dying on an ER table tomorrow. No, but it is. Who recently, a friend of ours, not a close friend of mine, but a close friend of one of my good friends, just recently passed away from cancer. And I had spoken to her maybe 3 years ago about doing a book. She was a writer. She was a showrunner in TV. And she had such a crazy story, like such a crazy life story, and was a writer. And I always say, like, there are people who are writers and there are people who have crazy life stories, but those two things aren't always the same, right? Like, and sometimes there are people who are writers who like don't have crazy life stories, but they just have like wild imaginations, and or the way they can describe a rock is like unendingly interesting, and then there are other people that they could have the craziest life story, but like that doesn't make them a writer. Or like everyone in prison would be a best-selling author, like, so it's so it's a And I know my father was in prison for many years. And we used to say, when I worked in book publishing, when I worked at Simon and Schuster, we literally had a prison pile because people in prison would write you letters all the time wanting to write their books and
Oh
thinking they
wow.
could get book deals because they have these crazy stories. I mean, it makes sense. You usually don't get to prison because your life was boring, you know? It's like
I want to meet the person in prison who's like had the most boring life, and the
story.
one time they tried to do something exciting,
Is it?
God damn, screwed.
Their one yes day went terribly wrong.
That's a comedy.
That is. Starring Will Ferrell. So we so yeah, it's, you know, but when you meet somebody who has this, like, they're a writer, they're a professional writer, they know how to tell a story, and they also have this incredibly interesting life story. And I remember talking to her, and 2 years later, she got a horrific cancer diagnosis, and 6 months later, she's gone, you know? And it was like the reminder, and not like as a part of my marketing, it was a reminder to me of, like, you know, don't die with the story inside you, you know? I mean, and it is that piece of, like, if you have a dream to write, you know, get it out, you know, start writing it. And yeah, and that's why, like, I was book coaching for years, just helping people to write the story, like you and I in that first conversation, of figuring out, like, okay, what is your book? And, like, how do we start pulling together these different elements and stories that you had that ultimately became Brown Enough? And, you know, and really beginning to, like, create a structure for that, and, like, get you, you know, and get you, I mean, I don't want to use the word formula, but I think, like, you know, finding out, like, what is the tone of this? And then, yeah, what is the structural formula that, like, each story was going to look like, even though they were completely different, and yet they were still united by these different themes that spread across your book.
And you have, is it 5 weeks, 2 weeks, 3 weeks to memoir? What is the
5 months, because no
5?
one writes a memoir in 2 weeks. If
I
they
was
don't
way
do that,
quicker. I was way quicker.
that's for that guy that, like, went to prison off of one day. He only had one day to write about, took him 2 weeks to write the book, became a national bestseller. No, so it's 5 months to memoir. It starts what month? It starts March 27th. And it's 8 group workshops where I really lead people through the craft of writing memoir. And I find that, especially for folks that are writing their first book, like, they might have, like, a natural sense of how to write a story, but we really get into, like, dialogue and character development and plot and pacing and structure and narrative. And, you know, how are you going to tell this story? You know, and I mean, like in Brown Enough, right? Like, I mean, there was a million different ways to tell that story. And, you know, you chose what we now actually call messay in my group, which is like,
Oh, tell me, yeah.
it's like memoir, but it's also essay.
A messy, yeah.
Yeah. And which is perfect. And so, because it is a little messy, which also makes it feel really real and lived in, because it's not like, let me tell you a story, but it's also not, let me tell you what I think. And it really is that braided memoir where you get to have the exposition of philosophy with still, like, the plot and the character and the dialogue of memoir, which I think your book did so great.
I'll speak on the counter end of someone who's been coached by you and worked with you. I think you have this great ability to be a doula of sorts, to help sort of birth something into the world. And I didn't have, I think a lot of people have good ideas and just need someone with an eye to put them in order. Like, there's something about order. Order is kind of important, and giving you place. And that was super helpful and efficient. Not 2 weeks efficient, but efficient.
Yeah.
5 months efficient. Yeah.
Then we built the best part about you and Trudy, although Trudy was way more, like, involved in the creation of Row House, was that while we were taking your book out and your agent was submitting it, I was simultaneously building Row House with Rebecca. And I kept telling you, like, Chris, don't worry, because we're building this really cool publishing house. I think you were like, yeah, whatever, lady. Like, we didn't know each other that well yet. Well enough for you to believe that I was actually.
I remember the phone call when you actually did it.
Yeah.
You did a bunch of, like, we're doing this thing. And I was
You
like,
were
yeah.
like, okay.
Well, I live in like LA and Hollywood, and everybody's doing a thing,
Yeah.
but not everybody does a thing. And so you said you were doing a thing, and I was like, okay. And then you did the thing, and then you called me, and I was in like, I know the exact driveway I was in, and I was with my partner, and I was like, okay, yeah, cool. They did the thing. And so
They did the thing.
and so then, yeah, y'all published the book that you worked on basically from beginning to very end.
To the very end. Yeah. No, it was exciting. I remember we kept using that word that year. It was like, it's exciting. It's exciting. But it was, and it was cool to get to do that. And I love doing that so much. I ended up doing it with my own company where we now have a hybrid publisher attached to the book coaching company, because I experienced the same thing. I mean, both with Row House, and though I certainly still send authors there, but, as not every author was a Row House author. And I wanted to be able to expand and still be able to offer folks a publishing home if traditional publishing ended up not being the right route for them, especially for a first book. I think a first book gives you the chance to like prove yourself. And I know we just had the chance to work on another book together. And I think it is so important that for some folks, it's like, all right, try to do an alternative route if you can for that first book. If you attempt traditional, like, don't just presume that a no from traditional publishing means that you're a bad writer or this isn't a good book. I mean, traditional publishing is just so hyper competitive and getting more so by the day. And they live in the weather vane of what's happening with global politics and global economy, and a lot of those indicators that unfairly impact authors, all authors, but then especially authors from any kind of, people of the global majority. But nonetheless, I mean, the weather vane now is like, they don't know what they're doing, so it's wild out there. And it doesn't mean people aren't still getting published, but it does, it very much looks the same as it always did. And so I do think that, alternative, whether that's independent publishing, small press. I mean, again, I'm doing hybrid because I just couldn't afford to be a small press publisher, which means people pay us to be published, but then they make much more on the back end. And so we just recognize, like, it's all about trying to figure out how to get these stories out into the world. And we attempt, like with you, where, we go the traditional route. We help authors get agents. Last year, actually, our authors surpassed $1 million in book advances. So, yeah, which is amazing. So, and, we've had dozens of authors get traditional book deals, and many who've gone on to be very successful after that, New York Times bestsellers and all the words, all the marketing, all the things I'm supposed to put on my website.
So if you want the words and the things on your website,
take
the workshop starting March 27th.
Yeah, and 5 months to Memoir. And but I'll say, like, what I love about 5 months to Memoir is that it is way more about craft. And though we have, like, the last class is about submissions and we get into the marketing side, but really 5 months to Memoir has always been for people who have dreamt of writing their story and really have no idea how to start that, or who have done we have a lot of first drafters in there who've actually done a first draft and they don't have the, either they don't have the connections and they don't have the resources to hire a private editor, but they want to be able to get feedback. And so it's really a great space for both people that haven't written a word, all the way to people who've written even, draft number 2 or 3, and who just really want a safe space to be able to get live feedback on it. So the course is 8 group workshops, and we start with that craft talk, whether it's on pacing or narrative or outline, as I said, and that's the first 15 to 20 minutes of our 2-hour group. The rest of the group is spent with people sharing 3 to 5 minutes of their writing and then getting like a 5-minute speed round with me. But what's really cool is that because everybody's writing about different stories, their writing all bring up different kind of ideas or concerns or challenges. And so it ends up being a craft talk about 20 different things, because everybody's writing brings up all right, you're struggling with this, or someone else has a question on that. And so, it's super fun for me because I get to just like be full force for 2 hours in terms of like doing that doula wizard shit that I love to do, which is like, all right, let's figure out what's missing here. And like, maybe it is just moving the Tetris pieces around to like click this story together in a way that feels more robust and feels like the story that an author was meant to tell.
I think it's really important when you're writing something to actually always be reading something or two things, even if it's only like very little amount every day, or to take these kinds of workshops because just to reiterate what you said, I think you learn from listening and from watching. You're really inspired. You're like, oh, that's a technique I didn't think about. That's an angle I didn't think about. And that really fills the cup as much as you are filling your own cup. And so I highly, highly recommend, I also just highly recommend working with you as an individual. Yeah, take the workshop. It's great. But also hire Kristen as an individual, mainly because that's just, I prefer that process personally. But I think everyone has their own thing. And how can people work with you as individuals or in this group setting?
So in the group setting, we do the 8 classes, and then there's 2 private sessions with me. So we do, and people can use them whenever they feel is right. Some people like to bookend it. Some people like to do it in the middle. Some people wait until the end and prefer to do it when everything's said and done and they've sort of had a chance to like settle with the content. And then we also do private book coaching. So most of our clients now work with Jamie Liu, who's our head book coach, because that's what happens when you run a company for 5 years. You can you're one of the few people who I privately coached recently because you're you. So some of my old clients still get to sneak in. But we still offer private book coaching. We help people with proposals. We help people with full manuscripts. We actually have a great 12-month manuscript program that's done directly with Jamie, which is, meeting every 2 weeks. And it's a lot like 5 months, except for you're really getting one-on-one coaching. You're turning pages in every 2 weeks. And then now with our hybrid publishing, we actually do like really big, amazing book coaching packages, which is really for folks who are looking for everything. And they're not working with me. They're actually working with Gina Frangello, who I don't know if you would ever worked with over at Row House. So Gina's a best-selling writer, an amazing editor. And she's written a number of incredible, critically acclaimed books, and she's everywhere. Gina's fantastic. And so she's going to be coaching all of our hybrid book clients. But, in the hybrid packages, we really go from like book idea, helping you develop it, helping you write the entire book. Then we take you through a traditional book publishing process, which is editorial, production, design, copy edits, proofreading. We actually get you your finished book. And then that's really when our work truly begins. I didn't do that, but I guess the Google Meet liked it. The Google Meet was like, I'll take it. And then we provide sales and distribution with Simon & Schuster. We have the same deal that Row House does. So they manage our sales into retailers. They manage all of our distribution to all the major retailers, as well as special sales and independent shops. We work with Smith Publicity. We do all of our own in-house PR for all of our titles. We do sub-rights through 2C's Foreign Rights, and we do our own audiobook recording and distribution through Blackstone Publishing. And this week, in the next week or so, we're going to be announcing, likely, we're going to also be bringing in TV and film development in-house with an independent producer. So really, it's like it's like getting a traditional book deal, but like it's the rich lady version of a traditional book deal. It's like that painting.
Amen. Every time you say something like that, for those people just listening, you can also watch it. Every time something dope gets said, the thumbs up pops up on the Google Meet.
The Google Meets keeps thumbs upping me.
So the universe agrees with you, and Rich
or
Lady
at least
Paintings
Google,
and Rich Lady Publishing. And where do they find it? Where do they sign up?
You can head over to risewriters.com. We have everything there, from our books under Rise Books to the book coaching program at 5 months to Memoir. It's right there on the main page. And obviously you can follow us at Rise Literary at Instagram on Instagram. And if this ends up going up on Substack, we're at Write the Good Fight. We are actually getting our acts together, and we're going to be launching a podcast next month called Write the Good Fight, which we're really excited about. So I recently produced the TEDx Ojai, and it's really begun to build out this whole other side of the business of doing live events. So up here in Ojai. So Chris will keep you posted, but we're hoping to do different writing events with authors at the Ojai Playhouse, which is incredible and beautiful. And we had such a great experience there for the TEDx Ojai. And so we want to be doing events there every few months with different writers, local authors here, and not just authors, but like screenwriters here in Ojai, as well as, you know, clients of ours, private clients, and our authors. So we're excited to start getting a series going in person as well as on the podcast. So lots of stuff. That's why I'm not baking the pies anymore.
Yeah, this will be on Substack. It's on Substack. I'll say it's on because it's just going to come out. And it can also be heard wherever you listen to podcasts and YouTube and all the things. So everyone listening, I know you have a story to tell. Not everyone, but a lot of you, mainly the majority of you listening on Substack right now. And I can't say enough good stuff about Kristen and Rise and my gratitude and generosity. And I genuinely mean that. Yeah, there's no cuts here for me. So enjoy and get your story out.
Agreed. We can't wait to get your next story out. So
on any final words?
Huh?
Any final words?
Any final words? No, just read everything Chris Rivas has written, because you're also a fantastic writer. And I will say that it's the true joy of getting to do this job is working with fantastic writers and then one day seeing them hold their books in their hands. So that's what we want for everybody who has that dream. And my goal is to help them get there, because I've been there too. So it's a beautiful moment.
On that note, read everything I've ever written.
Yeah.
Recording over.